And welcome to the panelists for the plenary session, Energy Industry Challenges to a Low Carbon Economy, the RES and the gas role in the transition. And good afternoon and welcome to the other participant who joined the session as a listener, but can interact and at the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. The program that you know includes 5 panelists, but unluckily one of them, Professor Valiev, is unable to attend the session for health problems. We are sorry he cannot be with us and send him our best wishes for his health. A panel with 4 speakers allow each panelist to speak 20 minutes and at the end 10 minutes for the question and answer session. After this technical information introducing the session, I must remember that the title of the session is good enough to give the speakers the opportunity to analyze and discuss all the main topics then the energy industry will have to face in the next decade. I will mention, for example, the oil industry challenges of replacing gradually the traditional fuels, gasoline, gasoil, with new ones, or for the carbon sequestration. The gas industry challenges for the development of new gases, for example, hydrogen or biogas, biomethane. The electric industry challenges for the development of renewable energy sources for the power generation and their integration into the market. But also the energy industry challenges as a supply and interface of the consumers, both the large industrial consumer, steel industry, chemical industry, and other main industry sectors, and the small and civil consumers increasingly oriented toward prosumer. Well, this is the sum of the talks because the talks that the energy industry are several. But give only an example of this. I want to ask your opinion about what your company from the sector you represent, you can give as opinion, as suggestion. Mr. Massimiliano Mannino, Shell Energy Italy Country Manager. What are the main challenges for Shell? Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Di Primio. Thanks a lot for having invited me to this session, which actually is a topic that I'm quite passionate about. I might have some slides, and perhaps I can use them to go through the topic, if you don't mind. So let me share my screen. Okay. Please let me know if it works, if you can see. Can you see my screen? Can you see the presentation? Yes. Okay, super. So you started with a question about Shell, and I will start with basically Shell commitments or Shell approach to lower carbon future. So in 2017, Shell first announced its net carbon footprint ambition, being perhaps one of the first gas and oil major companies to take this step. In April this year, this ambition has been recalibrated so that it is in step with the large sections of society that want to achieve a more stringent 1.5 degrees Celsius future. Shell will seek to achieve this overall ambition broadly in three ways. First, we aim to be net zero on all the emissions from the manufacturing of our products by 2050 or sooner. Second, we aim to reduce the carbon intensity of the energy products that we sell by 65% by 2050. And third, we aim to help our customers to decarbonize. And I think today I would like to focus a bit more on this third way to meet our ambitions. So the demand side. I particularly like the title of this panel, Industry Challenge to a Low Carbon Economy, as it reflects three areas that, in my opinion, are the most relevant ones in the energy transition. I start perhaps with the word challenge, because the task we have ahead of us is indeed not trivial. According to the International Energy Agency, the rising standard of living of a growing population is likely to increase the demand of energy by more than a quarter by 2040. At the same time, we must tackle the climate change. Limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius implies that the world needs to stop adding to the stock of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, a state which is known as net zero emission by 2060 or 2050, according to the European Union. And that's the challenge, providing significantly more energy to people in the next decades, while at the same time not adding further greenhouse gases is the real challenge that our generation is going to be confronted with. That was the first word. The second word, which I particularly liked, was low carbon economy, because collectively we will succeed in a sustainable transition if there will be an economy-wide approach that addresses emission in energy type, supply, and usage, enabling the creation of low carbon economies that can thrive and can flourish and prosper on low carbon energy systems. So the element of building an economy for me is extremely important. The third keyword in the title is industry. And again, this for me is very important because the success in tackling the energy challenge requires a collective effort within the industry. Producers, consumers, governments, none of us is excluded. In particular, the role of the demand in the energy transition seems somehow relatively neglected or given for granted in the public debate around decarbonization. However, globally, the industrial sector accounts for 36% of final energy consumption and contributes to 25% of total CO2 emissions. This means, and these numbers suggest that any decarbonization strategy will require active participation and buy-in from energy-intensive industrial consumers. And this is why I would like today to focus on the demand side. So, who am I? I happen to lead the Shell Energy Sales business in Italy. We serve some 500 large industrial customers in the country. And actually, I'm sort of double-hatting because I also manage the relationship with some top industrial European energy consumers. And this gives me a fantastic opportunity to observe every day how the industrial sector is trying to face the challenge of, on one side, meeting the demand of their products, and at the same time, reducing the emissions of their carbon and the carbon footprint. So let me therefore share a couple of observations from the perspective of an energy producer, trader, and marketer having such a daily dialogue with manufacturing companies. First observation is a bit of a good news. The commitment of the industrial sector to the usage of lower carbon energy is there, and it is stronger and stronger. In any of the sectors that we serve, our customers are increasingly asking for support, for ideas, or even for offers to reduce their carbon footprint. We have the first movers, the cloud companies. They consume predominantly electricity as an energy carrier. This helps them benefit from a more immediately available and accessible source of clean energy in the form of power from renewable sources. And we know that the cloud companies are normally the masters of incorporate PPA. Another sector, the food and beverage, is also very active and seems to be focused on energy efficiency, carbon offsets, and again, renewable power. But increasingly, they show interest also in circular economy, and this is where biogas and biomethane come into play. Biomethane, also in the form of bio-LNG, is a solution frequently asked by another sector, the automotive sector. But new sectors are stepping forward, including the so-called hard-to-abate ones, like steel. For these ones, on top of the today existing lower carbon solutions, more innovative and longer-term technologies are considered. For instance, hydrogen and carbon capture storage. And this leads me to the second observation. The number of possible solutions to decarbonize the industrial sectors are numerous. They have different applicability as well as different acceptability for each of the sectors. And they present diversified degrees of technological readiness and economic viability. So summarizing, the large consumers of energy are keen to decarbonize, but it is sometimes difficult for them to find the right pathway. So in this perspective, how can an energy supplier like Shell help them? I would say that first, the support that we can give is by providing immediate solutions that can help them address the energy transition pathway in the short term. These solutions available today can include on-site renewable generation, corporate PPA, carbon credits, just to mention some of them. We have very active conversations with our industrial customers for each of these solutions. For instance, we introduced combined natural gas and carbon offsets back in 2018 in Italy. And we are very active in the corporate PPA space in Italy, Europe, and globally, actually. But the energy suppliers are also urged to partner with industrial customers for longer-term solutions. These solutions are normally the ones requiring more investments and are necessary for those sectors where decarbonization is more challenging, particularly for feedstocks and high-temperature processes. Biomethane, green and blue hydrogen, carbon capture usage and storage play a central role in reducing emissions in the chemical, steel, and cement industry. So Shell is much active in this space. Sorry, I took the liberty of putting some news on the screen just to show you the variety of the solutions that we are discussing with our counterparties. So the energy suppliers are asked to provide short and long-term solutions, but increasingly, customers require advice to the energy suppliers, to us every day. I think my fellow colleagues in other energy companies might witness how our job has changed in the last couple of years. Knowledge sharing is now a key part of our sales job. And we are asked to have a deeper understanding of our customer businesses and of the multiple solutions available to decarbonize. We should also mention, though, that more and more industrial customers are becoming super expert in the energy transition, but the level of expertise is not yet equal across the industry. So let's now think for a second how complex should be for a manufacturer to define its decarbonization journey. You need to consider the effectiveness of each potential solution to abate CO2, but together with its costs. You need to anticipate the acceptance towards each solution by your stakeholders, customers, suppliers, investors, governments, NGOs. And you are asked to evaluate the technical complexities of adopting new fuels or new technologies while also looking at your competitors, because your competitors, you can be behind them, or you can invest too much and you can add too much cost, right? So it's quite an interesting equation that they are confronted with. And this is why the conversations with customers about decarbonization frequently swings from one technology to the other. So is it gas? Is it hydrogen? Is it electrification? Is it carbon removal? And flip across different potential approaches, right? And different timings as well. On one side, this doesn't entirely surprise because we are by definition in a transitional phase. On the other side, it can be a bit worrying as it witnesses a certain level of confusion. And this brings me to a key question. Considering how crucial it is that the whole industry moves without ambiguity towards decarbonization, can we afford even the slightest misalignment or confusion? Clearly not. So how can we overcome this difficulty? The first solution is pretty obvious, and it is somehow happening already. The large energy consumers need to equip themselves with new specific roles, capabilities, and knowledge about the energy transition. These will help them to consciously invest in solutions that are fit for their purposes. On the other side, the energy suppliers, as I mentioned before, will have to be able to offer a wide range of solutions, but also help large energy consumers to navigate through the details of the different available options. But this may not be enough. Governments can massively help drive clarity by making progress on key enabling policies. And these need to be as tangible and meaningful as possible. Let me share 3 examples. First, a reform of the European Emission Trading System, ETS, to align with the climate neutrality objective and ensure it is a fit-for-purpose instrument to balance greenhouse gas emissions, sources, and sinks. This will be the most effective way to initiate the adoption of low-carbon gases, like hydrogen, by the hard-to-abate sectors like steel or cement. Second example of decisive policy, a sectoral approach consisting of measures to accelerate and synchronize, I think that's quite important, the synchronization between demand and supply availability of lower carbon energy.
I remember 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes.
I'm done. This needs to be accompanied with greater investments in infrastructure to deliver lower carbon energies where they are required. Third example, ensuring that carbon removal technologies, including both nature-based solutions, so to simplify, investing in forests, and carbon capture usage and storage, can scale up to the level required to balance unavoidable emissions. Clear and coherent policies can massively help the demand side to take decisive steps towards the energy transition. So just to summarize, we all know that the challenge posed by the energy transition is unprecedented. It requires such a level of collective efforts within the industry, involving producers, consumers, governments, with no exceptions. And the role of the demand is crucial to enable the creation of economies that can flourish on low carbon energy system. Consumers deserve support to navigate through the challenge. They need a partnership approach from the energy supplier, while at the same time, they need to acquire specific decarbonization know-how. However, these may not be enough. Innovative and comprehensive energy policies need to be rolled out to make the regulatory and market frameworks a success factor for the energy transition, right? So I think I try to move from what Shell does, what we do with the customers, the challenges they face, and what could be the solutions, of course, involving we as suppliers, but the governments can help a bit.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mannino. For the questions, we wait the final session of question and answer, then we go directly to the second speaker. It is Luca Bragoli. Luca Bragoli from ERG, and ERG perhaps is a special case in Italy of a company that in a few years changes completely its strategy, and also its kind of business, because we remember that ERG started like a refining company, and today is a company nearly completely focused on renewable. Luca, For a company like yours, what is the challenge you see for the next decade?
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you for your introduction and for mentioning our story in the energy sector. You were part of such a story, so you know us well. Well, let's start on ERG, who we are today. Let me say that we have, as you know, more than 8 years of history in the energy sector, an history that has given us the experience and the know-how to be leaders in the industrial transition towards sustainability. Well, we are a listed company on the Milan Stock Exchange, but at the same time, we are a family-owned company. 3 generations of the family Garrone Mondini has led the company and are still part of the top management of the company. And who we are today, you told us, you told everybody, once we were refiners, but today we are a leading renewable energy developer and operator in Italy, owning and operating both wind, solar, and hydro assets. But not only, we have gained a European dimension through continuous expansion outside Italy. And now we are among the 10 largest onshore wind operators in Europe. So I would say a good achievement for a medium-sized company as we are. Let's have a look at our geographical positioning. As I was saying, it is pretty European. We are present in 7 countries, which are France, Germany, UK, Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria, together with Italy for sure. So what used to be a company focused on the running of our refinery in Sicily and on the distribution of oil products in Italy is now a European-wide multi-technology renewables developer and operator in continuous expansion. Why this is expansion? Well, that's because our financial performance, luckily, has not suffered in the transition, and this financial strength has given us and still give us the force and the push to allow the further sustainable expansion across Europe. And let's go to slide 4. I like this slide. This slide shows through images and through graphs what has been our path in the energy transition. So the circle charts at the top right of the slide show the evolution of our invested capital from gray to green over the course of 10 years. And you can see some other colors. I'm in the yellow and the blue, but they are still renewables. And let's go to the other part of the slide, which demonstrate that it is no coincidence that in the same years we transitioned from the oil to the power sector with this strong focus on renewables. Our production of renewables energy continuously increased, exceeding 5 terawatt hours per year since 2019. I think in 2020 our production will be in line with that of 2019, notwithstanding the pandemic. And our carbon factor, which means the quantity of CO2 emitted for each megawatt hour produced, decreased by 90% over this decade. And in the same decade, we were able to set ourselves the challenging global goal of avoiding the emission of 15 million tons of CO2 between 2018 and 2022. This comes from our last industrial plan we launched on March 2018. And at this regard, I'm happy to confirm that notwithstanding the pandemic, we're on track. We still think we can achieve the final goal of 15 million tons avoided CO2 by 2022. One slide more on ERG, just to show you what are our objectives according to the business plan I mentioned. We have a business plan which is focused on increasing our generation portfolio by 850 megawatts by 2022. And we are in the middle of this industrial plan, and we are leveraging on 3 channels, which are greenfield and co-development agreement to install new capacity, acquisitions of operating assets or pipelines, and repowering and reblading of our wind assets in Italy. I'll tell you more about this last intervention we are launched with our business plan. What is repowering? We think repowering is a huge opportunity for the power sector to increase green production. What is it? It's actually replacing the old turbines with an installed capacity of lower than 1 megawatt, and replacing those turbines with multi-megawatt turbines, and a lower number of turbines for sure. So with the same use of land, the same square meters used for producing energy, we will have the possibility to triple or more the green production. So we think it's a way to modernize the operating assets, but it's also a way to increase green production in a sustainable fashion. In a few words, repowering helps to reach the green energy production targets, creates construction jobs, and allow to renew the positive relationship with the local communities and territories where our wind farms are located. And this is paramount because, as you know, and we will investigate a bit more afterwards, the relationship with the local communities is pivotal for supporting and developing renewables. Let's go to slide 7. This slide has an objective, which is that showing what are the perspective of renewables for the years to come. We all know that we are in the middle of a pandemic, the COVID one, which has caused more impacts on the energy sector than any other event in the post-war history, with consequences that will last for long. But notwithstanding the pandemic, all the recent scenario, and those 2 graphs you are seeing just show this evidence, all the scenario see renewables increasing their capacity as a consequence of their competitiveness, because renewables are cheaper than the other sources, the fossil fuels one. And but the point is not the installation of renewables that are part of a strong market drive. The point is the CO2 emissions. What these scenarios are saying is that after a significant drop in the emissions in 2020, emissions are expected to return to pre-pandemic levels and further grow if governments do not step in. What means governments stepping in? Means governments approving consistent policies aimed at curbing the emissions in time, so to get the Paris Agreement objectives. So one point we will investigate better afterwards, but post-COVID recovery plans should accelerate the decarbonization of the economy. And for doing this, consistent decisions on the energy policies have to be timely taken by governments to support electrification, energy efficiencies, and renewables. Let's go to the next slide, which is dedicated to Europe, to our continent. So this slide shows the all-encompassing subjects and fields covered by the European Green Deal. As we know, to date, Europe is keeping the lead of transition through a massive promotion of renewables and decarbonization as a key driver to recover from the pandemic crisis. According to the European Green Deal and to the climate law, Europe should be the first continent to be climate neutral by 2050. What means this? It means that we will have soon, hopefully, new targets for 2030. So according to the recent decision from the European Council, we have landed on a challenging target of cutting the CO2 emissions by 55% versus 1990s level of emissions by 2030. So it's something that will imply a revision of the national plans that the member states have already presented and have accepted by the European community. European Union, sorry. So let's look at the national plan, our plan in Italy, what we have pledged to do in our country. According to the Climate and Energy Integrated Plan we have submitted to the European Commission, we will have by 2030 penetration of renewables and final consumption, energy consumption of 30%, which is huge. And as I was saying, it will be increased reasonably in the short term. And this means in the power sector that by 2030, 55% of the electricity production will be covered by renewables. That's a huge target, which means in terms of installed capacity, almost tripling the installed capacity in the solar and doubling the installed capacity of wind. So again, challenging targets. What we have to do to win this challenge? What are the challenges we have to face in the wind sector, but I would say in the renewable sector as a whole, in order to have achieve these goals? We have called internally in ERG the 4A challenge. And the first one is acceptability. Let's think about the turbines. Modern turbines are sensibly are considerably larger than the previous one. So the first one were 70 meters deep height, whilst this one, the new ones, are 180 meters. So we have a challenge in the acceptance of this technology. And this need of acceptability increases the need of local communities engagement, as I was saying before. And we need general education on the importance of renewables to cope with climate change. This is something that can come from operators for sure, but we think that also the education system, the national system should help in this direction, giving all the people a clear awareness on the necessity of renewables we have to decarbonize our economy. So state and private operators should partner and be supporter of the initiative to decarbonize the economy. The second point, which is, I would say, very, very important now, is authorization. Why is that? Because in Italy, just to give you an example, the average time length for authorizing a wind farm is 5.5 years. So it's too lengthy and too complicated. This means that you, meaning the operator, is forced to install an old technology, because every 2 years we have a new technology in the market. And if you have an authorization coming from 5 years ago, you are installing an old technology. So what we need for sure simplification, streamlining, and we need the public administrations having the scrutiny and the competence to scrutiny the findings coming from the operator with enough personnel to finalize this job. The third point is the access to grid, because for sure higher green energy output requires better connection and transmission. We would like to have a priority given by the system to the upgrading of the existing grids and then developing new ones where as necessary. And the fourth subject comes from the regulatory framework.
Luca, sorry, sometimes we lose or is not clear your voice. Perhaps if you stay near the loudspeaker, if you can, it's better.
I'm sorry, I'm pretty close to, but I will be closer enough as I can.
Well, I don't know.
I'm really sorry.
Closer, perhaps, I don't know. But sometimes we lose your voice or is not clear. Well, go on.
Okay.
Go on. Don't stop. Don't stop.
Okay, and I'll try to speed up because I don't want to steal time to other panelists. But the fourth thing is important. So the
5 minutes again.
Supporting mechanism to install renewables. As of today, we have a calendar covering up to 2021, and we think that a long-term visibility is needed to really develop also from an industrial standpoint the sector. So we are urging the government to release a calendar with volumes, budget, and technologies involved in order to have enough visibility to program, to plan our investments. Let's go to the next slide. This slide shows a really simple concept. The need for the increased penetration of renewables will increase the need of flexibility. That's something that we have to acknowledge and we have to cope with. So we need flexibility on one side and backup on the other side, and there are different technologies that might come in help to help this need of flexibility. We have gas-fired power station power generation plants, battery energy storage systems, hydro pumping, demand response, power to gas in the medium term. And when I say power to gas, I think to green hydrogen, just to avoid misunderstanding. So the existing CCGTs, we think, not always can provide the required flexibility. So in the short term, there might be a need of peaking plants, or in the medium or as soon as possible, as I was saying, of hydro pumping and battery storage. For sure, this need of flexibility has to be met, has to be accompanied with a properly designed market which remunerates flexibility, including the flexibility services coming from renewables. This is really important. And one last point on, I would say, on green hydrogen and gas to power. These are medium to long-term solutions. In our view now, it's really important to keep the track and to be focused on direct electrification by renewables and to energy efficiency. We think that green gases have to be focused and directed on the hard-to-abate sectors, such as long-haul transport or heavy industries. Last slide, just the conclusion. So I respect the timetable. Let's say decarbonization is a global process. We think it cannot be avoided if we want to tackle climate change. This is something we really vocal. ERG intends to take a leading role in this path of decarbonization, and I think facts are showing our willingness to have a leading role. Current and upcoming business plans of ERG will be entirely dedicated to renewables. So we are confirming our strategic view for developing our company. Three fundamental aspects we think have to be taken into consideration by governments, including the Italian one: clarity and adequacy of proposals in using that will be released to use the recovery packages made available by the European Commission, determination and capability in execution, and speed and drive in getting the decarbonization targets we have already identified with our national plan. So we think in the end, it's not only a matter of energy transition. To seize the opportunities created by electrifying the economy through renewable powers, it's once in a lifetime chance to create, for the benefit of next generation, a more efficient, sustainable, and just society as a whole. I think I have terminated. Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you for your presentation. Now we go to Lorenzo Mottura, Strategy and Corporate Development Director, Edison.
So,
Edison is an old company. You only to remember that
yes.
Edison is one of the oldest company in Italy with a very large experience in different businesses. Then I think that the challenges for Edison are more diversified, perhaps, in terms of problem to find solution, to decide, to take, to define strategies. Lorenzo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Di Plinio, for the opportunity of being here in this panel. And of course, we are 130 years old, but we try to keep and to act young and look ahead for other 130 years ahead. So besides jokes, have to admit that have many points in touch with Luca Bracoli from ERG in the evidence that he put forward, and I will complement some of his points of view. So first of all, just to understand where my point of view will come from, a quick look at Edison. So Edison somehow has a kind of unique positioning in Italy in terms of portfolio, because it has a portfolio which is well balanced across the value chain. So from power generation to gas midstream down to downstream, energy efficiency and sales, and across technology. So today we have something like 20% of RES production in power generation, of renewable production. Target is to reach, to double this by 2030, so to reach 40%. We have 3 and more gigawatt of the existing CCGT, which is 55% efficiency CCGTs, but also we are in the construction of the first 2 high efficiency CCGTs that will enter the market, to 800 megawatt CCGTs that will come on stream on 2022 and 2023. So it has been a challenge to believe in this market, but so far the results of the capacity market options have proven to be very encouraging. Then we have 1 gigawatt more or less of hydro, large and mini hydro concessions, 1 gigawatt of wind, and we have 100 megawatt plus of PV, which is grid scale PV, which is growing. So this is on the power generation side. Then on the gas side, we are the second gas importer with 22% market share in gas, with a very diversified portfolio in terms of duration, routes, gas, LNG, and so on, and diversified uses, captive, third-party term, industrial resellers, and wholesales. And we are actively working in developing new uses for gas, for example, the use of the small-scale LNG for transportation. And on the downstream part, We are somehow very active in energy efficiency, mainly on larger players, industrial players, and then public administration. And in supplier of commodity, we are second supplier in Italy in terms of volumes, but in terms of numbers of contracts, we are more or less 1.5 million retail customers, including commodity and services. So starting from this point of view, we have now two time horizons that have been clearly mentioned by the previous speakers. We have 2050, the end game, which is clear. It's European carbon neutrality. And then we have 2030, which is right in the middle. So here it is key to ensure that the momentum is there to reach 2050 targets. So RES will play a key and relevant role, and all the targets have been mentioned before. So the 55% of power generation from RES set in the PNIEC to be brought to 65 according to the new European target. On the other hand, RES will not be, let's say, the only ingredient. Gas will continue to play a relevant role in supporting the transition. First, in substituting more polluting energy sources, and second, in allowing for diverse development, which otherwise will not be able to develop. Other key ingredients will be foster the electrification. E-mobility, for example, it is going to be crucial from here to 2030, but then it will be very important to pave the way for green gas, large-scale adoptions. We will see later on something about that. And also, it's time now to continue intensifying the efforts in improving the efficiency increase in renewables. We have seen the repowering, for example, presented by Luca Bragoli, but also in PVs, there's the possibility to develop new technology that are, for example, multi-layer technology to increase the power per area used. So this is the play for 2030. For 2050, just a brief touch, it is key to identify the optimal mix to reach carbon neutrality. And this is country-specific, but has to be EU coordinated, because each country can bring different elements to the overall picture. The landing point will depend very much on the technology evolution, which is still to be written, but for sure electrification will play a major role. In this, renewable and gas will be still the two main ingredients with different challenges to be faced. So RES, the key challenge is development speed and land competition, because somehow the use of land will become important and will compete with other utilization. And for gas, the challenge is to develop as much as possible as affordable, also green gas, and for the remaining carbon capture sequestration should be the point to go. So now that's the theory. Then when we go into practice, we have a nice dilemma, and this has been clearly already touched upon by Luca. So on one hand, we have factors that are pushing for the development of renewables, so new targets, incentives to support the development, new technology that is coming and it's increasing the efficiency, the size of the blades, number of layers of panel, the possibility to use sooner or later floating offshore and so on. And on the other hand, the increase of the demand of green electricity. So to reduce CO2 impact, to supply power for the electrification of new final uses, and then coming on stream also for hydrogen production. And then there is the evolution also of the incentive schemes for residential customers. So 110 eco bonus and the energy communities will help in boosting the development of PVs. On the other hand, we have very long authorization process, up to 5.5, 6 years to get authorization for wind plant and 20 months for PV. It's largely too much, and the latest auctions for incentives have clearly shown that this is a problem. And then we do not have enough incentive scheme to support the full development. Because, for example, if we take grid scale PVs, it is possible to develop on non-agricultural areas. But for example, if you take the south, there are not many sites with a given, let's say, possibility to develop enough large plants on these non-agricultural areas. On the other hand, it could be possible to develop merchant. So let's say using the price signal to continue developing the PVs. But here we have the so-called modulation effect, the fact that the more, I mean, PVs are all producing at the same time. So when PVs are, let's say, in over generation, the price will go to zero. And somehow there is, let's say, a self-limiting factor in the development of possible PVs on a merchant basis. So given the current situation, the possibility to install the renewable, it's the real bottleneck for energy transition. So there are many that can be done by the system. And some evidence of that, we see it in the next slide. On the left-hand side, I've represented the results of the last auctions, 2019 and 2020 auctions. We do not have the October one yet. And you see that the first auction somehow was fully booked, with some players losing the auctions. The second auction already, a part of that was not awarded. And the third auction, the majority of the available space was not awarded, meaning that somehow the problem is not, let's say, having projects. The problem is having authorization ready on time to be able to deploy on the land the different projects. And if we continue with this speed, on the right-hand side, we have presented an illustrative projections at current development pace. And just look at the central column 2030. What you can see there is that somehow, if we continue with the current pace, we will reach only 49% of power generation from renewables, when the PNIEC target is 55%. So compared to PNIEC, we may be, Italy risk to be 5 years late. And if we look at the new Green Deal target, 65%, this is going to be even worse. So this is now the key bottleneck, the possibility to put on the ground renewables. Now, what is the impact of renewables on the system? So of course, renewables are taking space in the system, especially during the central hours of the day. So they are eroding the day-ahead volumes that are today provided by CCGTs, and this is fine, effect. But CCGTs will still remain key for the system, for the adequacy of the system, because they will have to supply, let's say, capacity at the peaks, and to be able to cover, let's say, the morning hours and the evening hours. So somehow CCGTs will continue to play a role in the adequacy, but also, and you see it on the left-hand side, we made, let's say, a kind of simple correlation between the evolution of the installed capacity of wind and PV, so non-programmable resources, the blue bars, and the volume of the ancillary service market. So the ancillary services are those services that the system requires to compensate between the forecast of production and demand and the real production and the real demand that the system experiences. So you see there is a clear correlation. One means that will grow the other. So growing non-programmable capacity increase the need for ancillary services. And today, CCGTs are providing most of the, let's say, ancillary services together with hydro. But in the future, we will need to develop to cope also with the overgeneration of PV. Very important role will be played by hydro pumping plants and the mine-side management. And in the mine-side management, I am including with a question mark also the hydrogen production from renewables as a way to compensate from overgeneration. Now you see this is a projection of the evolution of possible, let's say, flexible capacity. So you see for thermal plants, the green bar are the existing capacity. So the existing capacity will progressively come to an end of the technical life. And the orange bar, the light orange, is the repowering. So there will be a season of repowering of existing CCGTs, but also there will be a season for the development of new high efficiency CCGTs that somehow will improve the impact in terms of CO2 and will be, let's say, more competitive on the market to support renewables. And this will be done, has to be done in parallel with the increase of hydro pumping. The PNIEC foreseen 4.5 gigawatt of additional hydro pumping, remuneration mechanism yet to be defined. Grid scale batteries will likely play a role more, let's say, in specific areas to provide, for example, faster regulation services. The Terna pilot has recently been awarded. And then also residential batteries will play a key role for supporting self-consumption, and the role of vehicle to grid and demand response, it's still a question mark. Now, if we move to gas, somehow we have seen the first part, how gas can support RES development, addressing system needs, adequacy and flexibility, fine, so CCGTs provide programmable power, but at the same time, gas and gas-fired generation are allowed to cope with delays and acceleration in RES development. And this is very important because it allows, in the meantime, in the 2030 game, to cope, let's say, with time shift and technological evolution. On the other hand, today it can already displace more polluting fuels, like, for example, can support the phase out of coal at 2025, but also with the utilization of the LNG, the small scale LNG for heavy and maritime transport, it is possible already today to reduce, and without incentives, the carbon footprint and the pollutant footprint of many industrial players. And finally, we have the direct support that green gases can give to the system in terms of decarbonation. So the carbonation of industrial energy intensive uses that cannot be, let's say, electrified, but also in the transitory phase can support, let's say, sustainable mobility. So aside, as a complement to electrification and e-mobility, bio-CNG and bio-LNG and green gas can play an interesting role. Now, green gas do have challenges too. Here is an illustrative projections that is taken from SNAM with some elaboration done by Edison on the possible evolution of the green gas. So today, to give you an idea, 70 BCM, it's the size of the gas market in Italy. And of course, this size will reduce over time due to efficiency. But in 2040, the forecast for the potential, not for the real numbers, but for the potential for the sum of the green gases, biomethane, bioenergy, green hydrogen, and synthetic methane, says that we may reach up to 19 BCM, which is something like 25% of the gas demand expected in 2040. Now, here, the challenges as for renewables are very important. So first of all, there are incentives today, the incentive window for biomethane, which is a CO2 neutral methane that is, let's say, developed on waste, organic and agricultural waste, last till 2022, likely 2023. So there is a big uncertainty afterwards. And then if you look at the potential, more than 50% of the potential for biomethane and bio-LNG comes from, let's say, agro-monocrop, meaning that agriculturally dedicated crop that have to be, let's say, take place in concurrency with other agricultural area utilization. And they are not incentivized, and as I mentioned, can be conflicting with food agricultural activities. So the future for biomethane, it's very interesting business now, but there are some, let's say, big questions on the actual impact that this can have. And then we go to hydrogen. Everybody's crazy today for hydrogen, but let's look at that. So green hydrogen means that it's hydrogen produced with renewable powers, fair enough, then very interesting, but in order to develop on top of the activities to decarbonize electricity, to have enough renewable powers to develop hydrogen, we have to increase in a significant way the amount of RES that are invested, that RES that are put on the ground. And already we are tight with the authorization process. Already we risk to be late compared to, let's say, the target. So this is going to be very challenging because each, let's say, panel that we move from the carbonation of electricity, we use it to produce green hydrogen, then it will be replaced somewhere else by CCGTs that will produce the missing, let's say, electricity produced by that panel. So gas, again, used in the system. And then we need to develop a clear chain of electrolyzer in Italy to be competitive and to have sufficient economy of scale. So many challenges all in one, and heading towards 2050, of course, these many challenges will have to be faced, including the technological one that somehow it's the most important one that will determine the landing point. So for sure, looking at 2050, electrification and energy efficiency will play a great role. Renewables and gas will continue to be the key actors, but then also the carbon capture and sequestration, which today seems very far, will have to play a role both in power generation and in industry, of course, and somehow also in hydrogen production. So I'll stop here and with a big thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Guillermo Tura. Now we should have the Giacomo Rispoli, CEO of My Chemicals. He told me that he was not able to join us from the beginning, but they could arrive during the session. Till now, I have not seen him. I'm trying to know if he is arriving or not, but at the moment, I suggest to start with the question and answer session. If he arrives, we can give him the word to make his presentation. At the same time, I start with the question and answer. I don't know if there are questions among the speakers. Massimiliano Martino, do you have any questions?
Oh, I think perhaps rather than a question, a little comment on the two presentations, which I really enjoyed. I would like in particular to echo what Lorenzo Mottura from Edison said about the variety of the solutions, right? And I think we must be a bit open, right? Because in the next 2-3 decades, there will not be a single technology, right? I think the electrification is something that needs to happen, must happen, and alongside electrification, more and more renewables will need to come into play. But we know that in the next few years, still natural gas has a role to play. In the very short term, for instance, gas is a natural candidate to replace coal and nuclear, which present different problems. Something that was perhaps missing, you may remember I start with some appreciation with the title of this panel. There was one word which was missing, in my opinion, the air quality. Air quality is an issue, perhaps a bit less in Europe, even if in northern Italy is an issue. But in other parts of the world, like China, it's a significant problem. And replacing coal with gas, it's definitely an interesting solution. And in the short term, gas can help not only in displacing gas and nuclear, but also in basically helping the renewables intermittency issue that were highlighted by both ERG and Edison. And in the long term, natural gas in the form of cleaner gases like hydrogen, may it be blue or green, is continuing to play a role. Let me mention that we have an enormous infrastructure for natural gas in Europe, and we can leverage that infrastructure in the next years, and we should do that, right? But do that in a sustainable way. So yeah, just a little comment from my side, perhaps not really a question. And I also like the point about carbon capture storage. We have 51 projects globally in Shell for carbon capture storage. We believe in carbon capture storage. And in general, we believe in all the sinks for carbon, including the natural ones. This is why we are investing also in forestry, right? Because the Mother Nature is actually the best tool we have to recapture the CO2 from the atmosphere. So yeah, just a little comment.
That's an interesting comment.
If I may comment on the air quality, it's very funny because during the first lockdown, I've been suggested to install an app to monitor the air quality, okay? And it's very nice because it gives you a colorful map that shows you the hot point, the red point for pollution, okay? And it was lockdown, so I mean, full lockdown. We are back to March, so somehow cars were definitely less circulating than normal times. And the first time, I mean, I was impressed by looking at the European map, and there were two areas with red spots. The first one was Poland, and it was very nice because it was like a compass circle, and those circles were on the coal power plants. So very identified, let's say, nice areas. And the second important area was Pianura Padana. It was completely red, and cars were circulating less and less. So, and this is not only CO2, this has to do also with the rest of the pollutants, has to do with PM10, PM2.5. So somehow this is one of the contradictions, for example, we have in northern Italy, the use of biomass, for example, which is very good in terms of, let's say, CO2 neutrality, can be very bad in terms of quality of the air, because somehow they are a great source of PM10 and PM2.5. So I agree that somehow today air quality, it's not that a subject yet. We are more focusing on CO2, and everybody's talking about CO2, even if somehow it took a while for Italy to come on this subject compared to other countries. But we have to put the attention on air quality too. And that could be a fantastic opportunity to couple the air quality with the development of smart cities and the digitalization and 5G. I do not want to put additional subject on the table, but it's fascinating how somehow, if we start looking from, let's say, a systemic point of view with a long time horizon, there is much to be done on the energy sector. So it's really challenging, but a real great opportunity to be part of this transformation in this period.
Thank you. Luca?
Well, frankly speaking, I'm a bit reluctant in considering a role of natural gas in the medium to long perspective, in the medium to long term, if we want to get to the decarbonization targets we have identified through the Paris Agreement. I understand that in the short term, and even in the medium, gas must have a role. We have all said the same thing. We need flexibility. We need to cover seasonal needs that for now can be covered only through gas. But I see gas, natural gas, also as a greenhouse gas itself. And as you know, the value chain of natural gas has a lot of leaks, and So I think that in the long term, we have to work all together to find alternative solutions to natural gas. One might be green hydrogen. CCS and CCUS will have to see how economically, financially sustainable they are, but why not? In the short term, I think that it's really important that some world regions, such as I think to Asia, for example, China, India, try to accelerate their phase out from coal. This is something which we, I mean, governments should try to focus on. Why is that? Because as of today, coal still covers more than a quarter of the energy needs worldwide, and it is responsible for more than 40% of the carbon emissions due to fossil fuel consumption. So it's a first target we should try to partner and be allied against, because even from a air quality perspective, as my colleagues were underlying, it's of essence. So just to conclude, in the short term here in Europe, I think that our priority is still electrification, and an electrification driven by renewables. That's what is paramount for me.
Thank you, Luca. Well, decarbonization is a global issue. You remember all that we know. But your opinion is that the target to arrive to decarbonization in 2050 is a realistic target, or is a vision that need an effort and a change of march? Because you remember, Luca, that some countries, China, India, are trying to phase out the coal, but in the same time they are investing in oil refineries, for instance. I read last week that India is doubling its refining capacity in next 5 years. Then the direction is perhaps the decarbonization, but the time to arrive to decarbonization is very far from the target that in Europe, but also coming from the Paris Agreement, we have in mind. I don't know what's your opinion.
Well, Carlo, I think you're right. I think that there is some inconsistencies coming from China and India as to new investments, not only in coal but also in the oil sector. I do believe that with the new presidency of the United States, we should try to have more push towards consistent policies to drive decarbonization. One, for me, is the tax issue. If we succeed in having some sort of due taxation on carbon emissions with a worldwide perspective, that could be a significant drive, a significant push, able also to influence the policies of India and China. Otherwise, you're right, it's really difficult. But let me say that let's look at Europe. As you know, Europe is reforming its ETS system. It's enlarging the scope of the mechanism, but it's also discussing about the introduction of a carbon adjustment mechanism. Well, I think that could be a really first start to go in the right direction. And one more thing as to the ability, to the possibility to get to the objectives. one good news we have is that we have already at least the technologies to get to the 2030 objectives. So I mean, a first part of this path is already identified. We have the technological solutions; they are economically feasible, and we can work on that. And then in these 10 years, for sure, with innovation, technology will be able to give us the further push, the further step for getting to the whole decarbonization within 2050, to the net zero target we are working for.
Thank you. Other comments? Mannino, Mottura?
So I think that sooner or later China will also come to neutrality. If I'm not wrong, they have committed carbon neutrality 2060, which is not 2050. So somehow it may be a way to go. Of course, they have to do a path before, so I'm not surprised they are investing now in refineries. I mean, there are full things they have to develop first to reach that target. And then target have to be challenged, because that's a game theory, because otherwise we do not. Well, that's in the nature of human beings. If you let things go, they do not go. So they have to be challenged. But I fully agree that we have, at least for 2030, the technology we need to reach it. So definitely, and it's more a matter of getting organized in order to be able to deploy that technology on time. And if Italy, but also Europe, manages to do that, somehow we have a great opportunity also from an industrial point of view. So we can leverage that to develop, let's say, possibility for new jobs and so on. So I think that it's really an opportunity that Europe has to take.
Okay, thank you. Now I see that Giacomo Rispoli is with us.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody.
Oh,
sorry, but we had some problems with the connection. Now,
sorry, I had only to inform you that we have only 10 minutes because we must finish at 6 o'clock, at 4 o'clock p.m. because we have other sessions after your hour. Then I must ask you to be very synthetic.
Okay, I'll try to summarize everything in 10 minutes. And while we are trying to load the presentation, let me say one concept. We generated as a next scan a complete new concept of sustainable mobility, starting from the waste. Our idea was to use the waste as a source of hydrocarbons and a source of carbon and hydrogen, because in the waste there are up to 50% of the carbon and from 5 to 10% of hydrogen. Considering what the World Bank says about the waste, and municipal waste, that they expected to increase up to more than 3 billion per tons per year of this waste. Our idea is, since the municipal solid waste, the RDF, and the non-recyclable plastics are an important source of carbon and hydrogen, the idea is to extract this carbon and hydrogen, and with a partial oxidation schemes, with making use of oxygen and also part of natural gas, we have a partial oxidation, and we are able to convert all the waste, most of the waste, into syngas, one part of hydrogen, the other part of carbon monoxide, and what is not hydrocarbons is extracted as a liquid from the bottom, and then when it's in touch with cold water, we generate a liquefied product that can be In this way, we started from waste, we generated a syngas, we purify all this syngas with washing with a chlorinic acid solution and then with a caustic solution. We generate this syngas, and once we have the syngas, we have, let me say, the building block of the chemistry. In this way, we generated a project for hydrogen, methanol, and ethanol. Or in other way, since we are looking at the product for sustainable mobility, we generate methanol, and we have a project in the refinery to produce methanol. We generate hydrogen, and now everybody in Europe talks about hydrogen. We can generate hydrogen starting not from natural gas or from electrolyzer, but directly from waste. We can generate ethanol with a process of fermentation of the gas with bacteria, and we generate ethanol that can be used for gasoline blending or natural gas. But what is important, all the products, let me say, if we start from 200,000 tons of the waste, we can generate more or less 25,000 cubic meters of hydrogen, or we can generate this quantity, more or less 100,000 tons of methanol, or 62,000 tons per year of ethanol. But what is important that for each of the products that we are going to generate, there is a significant CO2 saving when it is compared with life cycle analysis assessment. And this means that we are able in this way to generate new products for a sustainable mobility with a lot less CO2 emission. But why we avoid all these CO2 emissions? We avoid these CO2 emissions because we compare the what we do in our system with the conventional system. So if it is hydrogen, we compare the steam reformer emission to produce hydrogen, and we have the emissions in our cycle minus the emissions coming from a conventional incinerator. This means that if we deduct all these emissions because we don't no longer need of incinerator, this means that the products that we are going to generate are products with a very low carbon intensity. And so are the products going into the direction that European Commission indicated of producing products with a lower carbon footprint. That's all. I think that probably remained in these 10 minutes. Let me say that these three projects, we studied these three projects in two in the AIEE refineries, are projects that can be integrated very well in the conventional refinery where we already have the brownfield, we have the skills, the competencies that we need to operate such a unit. We have all the services, of course, that we need, power and everything. Then, let me say another important thing, that if we integrate, if the saving of CO2 that we can reduce more than 100,000 tons of CO2, 261 in methanol case, 100 tons for ethanol case. In case if we are, let me say, the power coming from renewable sources, we can say that we can add more or less another 70,000 to 80,000 tons.
Okay. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, let me conclude. These projects are based on technology that are reliable, and so we are ready to install immediately in the project. And so when we deploy this technology, our technology as much as robust like the other technology that the refineries are seeking. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Giacomo Rispoli. Sorry if we must be very concise, but it's are the rules of the conference. We can come back on the same subject in the next webinar that we can organize in next weeks. And I hope that the interesting subject can be followed for many experts and people interested. For the moment, I say thank you to all the panelists that accepted our invitation, and it's the time to see you. Good luck for the future and for your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.